Cool. All right. So, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending this session. As Sarah said it, I'm Maxime Baux. I'm here to talk about bridge chart today. Sarah just introduced it, but I want to start again with a small piece of vocabulary here. So maybe before I start, I would like to redefine what is a waterfall and what is a bridge. I'm not sure if I can say what is. I will say what I will call a waterfall and what I will call a bridge chart, because if you actually look in Google, if you look for a waterfall chart, you will find both kind of charts, and the same will also happen if you look for a bridge chart. So in this session, what I will call a waterfall is this chart. What I will call a bridge chart is this one. They are pretty much the same, with one big difference, one main difference, which is the fact that the bridge chart has, as Sarah said it, a start and an end. And so we would more use a waterfall chart to see, maybe like it's written here, how one indicator is distributed along some dimensions members. And we would use more a bridge chart to see the variations, maybe from one period to another one. So as you can see here, as in this example, for example, how did each subcategories impact the total growth versus last year? So the whole goal of this session is to give you some tips and some advices and techniques about how to actually build those kind of charts. But let's start with the beginning, and let's start with the standards. How do we actually start with a waterfall in Tableau? So the waterfall is something very known. That's maybe one of the most known tutorial when it comes to Tableau, and when you start to create what we call advanced visuals. It's a very known one because it uses a simple trick that may cause you huge trouble if you actually don't know it. So I'm going to start with the waterfall. For both charts, we should always proceed this way, and that's maybe my way to go. You may find your own, but I would always proceed the same way. I would start by just first building the different columns of my charts. So for here, the different subcategories and then the total. There, the different years and the subcategories in between. And as soon as I already have my, let's say, skeleton, I have the different columns that I want to represent, then I will focus on the different indicators. So if I go back to my waterfall and I try to build this, I will just start by dragging my subcategories. So I'm going to take my subcategories, maybe implement a small filter so that I can remove, for example, the office supplies, so that I will have a tiny bit less members here, and I will have a more simple chart. And as soon as I have that, the only missing columns I have is the total, right? So I'm going to analyze these totals, and I will show my raw grand total. I do have now all the different columns of my waterfall, and I can start tackle now displaying and representing the indicator, right? In my case, it's the profit. So I'm just basically here going to add my profit inside my chart, and I end up with this, which is not much satisfying because it's just a bar chart. So I have already my different values. The only thing is that I don't want them to be displayed from 0 to the value for each subcategories. I would like to stack them up here and have a running total that would go from 0 to the actual total here. And now the trick here is to actually use not only my indicator, but to add a quick table calculation on top of that, which is going to be the running total here. So I'm going to apply a running total, and I can directly see that my different profits are stacked now on top of each other, and they go up to the total, right? Now, this doesn't look like a waterfall chart because as the mark type here is a bar, then everything starts at 0. So what we're going to have to change is two things. First, use a Gantt bar instead, and therefore we'll have only a small line at the top of the bar where the bar used to be. And then we want this actually to be sized according to the profit, right? Because if I would put here the profit on the row shelf, then I can directly see here that if I want to go here from 49,000 to 38,000, then I need to add this height, which is just the simple profit height, which is minus 3,000 here. So if this is the height I want to use, then I will just take the profits and then put it on the size, and still doesn't work. Well, that's normal, and you should always know that and be aware of that. The way Tableau works actually with the Gantt bars is that the Gantt bar, without adding a size on it, is always the beginning of the bar, and then it goes up, it doesn't go down. So the trick here is to actually put your profit here and then reverse it, add a small minus here so that you will reverse the chart, make it go upside down, and you will end up with your different waterfall. So we're going to start with that, then add it on the colors, and of course we're going to take care about adding different colors for sure, maybe just a two-step colors, remove, do some formatting, add the labels and so on. But so far our chart is done. Well, this is good. This is something that is already suitable, but if my aim is actually to have a bridge chart, which goes from the beginning to the end, then I'm going to have to use a different technique, or I'm going to have to enhance my technique and to add different features in order to have this beginning and this end. So I'm going to try to display and to show you three techniques that you can use. And the first one is my favorite one, is the one using the relationships. So be aware that this technique can be used only if you are a creator, if you have the right to actually change your data source and twist it a bit so that you can build your bridge. The two other ones technique that you can use actually can be used by everyone. So if we go back to the bridges, I would consider here two kinds of bridges: multiple values one and split dimensions one. If we take a look at something that is called multiple values, I'm sure that everyone here already tried to use multiple measure values and to display them on a different chart. And we all one day tried to perform a case calculation or if calculation based on the measure values, right? And that is something that we can't really do easily because of the way it works. So here, this kind of chart is always a bit tricky because we have different measure values that we would like to split and to represent here across one dimension, add running totals and stuff like that we can't do. We also have a different bridge chart, which are the ones that are splitted into two dimensions, right, or one dimension. Here, for example, we have a start, which is the year 2021, and which is the year 2022. And in between that, we added a split of the profit across the different subcategories. This one is the exact same one than the one we just built here, except we have more subcategories, right? So I'm going to start with the multiple measure values one, and I will try to show you those two charts. If I want to build that, I will have some issues. And so here, for example, let's take the different values that we would like to represent as a bridge. If I take all those KPIs, I assume that I've already done all my calculation, that everything is ready for me to do it. If I want to build a bridge using that, the issue I'm going to face is that all my values, they are actually represented onto different calculations, right? One single point of data that I have is not only represented once, but few times. For example, if I take here my price effect, that's looking at how much the change of prices in my data from the last year to the current one impacted my overall turnover, right? And therefore, if I want to calculate my price effect, I need to consider both my sales from last year and my current sales. And that means that every single row of my data that would belong to the current year is appearing here, but also there. And it may be even also appearing here. And that's the main issue with the bridge chart, right? We have to display several times the same data onto different locations and different positions. One way to do that is to actually use the relationships and to leverage the power of the relationships in order to duplicate our data without crashing and destroying the KPI's value. And that is, for me, the beauty of this feature that was added in 2020. The relationship model is something very cool because of that, because it allows us to actually replicate our data by preserving also the different measures that we have, and Tableau will not duplicate any indicator and will preserve the different values. Nothing is going to be destroyed or replicated, and this is something that we can always use. Now, when we talk about replicating our data, we would usually talk about data densification, right? The fact of performing a link between our data and maybe an Excel file in order to replicate our data, I don't know how many times, and make sure that we can find back our data on several areas. So most of the tutorials you will find on net, they actually use an Excel file with 2 columns, 1 ID, 1 link, and they allow you to replicate your data, right? I would personally use this, which is a small Excel file I built that allows me to densify my data without using an Excel file, but more doing that directly on my database. And that prevents me to have any issue while refreshing the data. I don't have to build any cross database relationship, anything. I'm just building a new custom SQL query. I'm writing this down. It does not trigger any table. It costs almost nothing in terms of performance, and it produces this. It gives me as many lines as I want, and it gives me a column that is called link that helps me build my bridge. So let's hit OK here, and let's then perform a small link between those two values. Here, create a relationship, 1 equal to my different link. Oh, sorry, I picked the ID. 1 equal to link. So I have a 1-to-1 condition. I'm replicating my data, and I can go back to my demo in order to then build my my bridge. So I'm going to use this, and as I said, it works the same than the waterfalls, right? So we're going to start by building the bridge columns. So let's take the bridges here, bridge columns, and what we can do now is to just use those IDs that we just brought here inside the data, and we're going to make a case through those IDs and say that when it's 1, then we want to have the year, but not the year, the last year. So we're going to take last year minus 1 and convert it to a text. When we are going to have 2, then we want to have our price effect. When we're going to have 3, then we want to have the volume effect. And 4, then the mix effect. All right, so these 4, and then once we have 5, then what we want is to have str of our year. And I've made a small mistake while I created my join here, because I don't think that I brought enough IDs. Yeah, here I have only 4, so let's go back to my relationship. Edit that SQL query, and then add another condition saying that we want to have also the 5th one. All right, back to my demo. I can now have, and here find my different IDs. I can bring on top of that my different columns. And as soon as I have my different columns, then I can hide also the IDs, right? I have my different columns, then I just need to bring the different bridge values, right? So let's call it bridge values. And I am going to right-click describe these bridge columns so that I can copy-paste the whole case calculation. And based on this case calculation, I will just now, instead of bringing the headers, I will bring directly my different values. So I want here to have the sum of sales minus 1. I want there to have my sum of sales n at the end of my bridge. And in between, I want to have my price effect, my volume effect, and my mix effect. So what I'm actually doing here, I'm actually having now, by using the relationships, I'm having this dimension, which is the ID, on which I can put whatever I want, and that allows me to then do a case, do a running total, do whatever I want across those different measure values. And this is something I couldn't do before, right? So now I've got my measure values. I just need here to say, I want to add a table calculation. I want to say here, I want my quick table calculation running total. Of course, I'm going to have small issues here. I need to bring my bridge values to the gun bar. I'm going to have to here reverse it in order to have a minus. And last but not least, you can see here that this is actually replicated twice. What we need is to tell Tableau that this running sum works, but it doesn't work for the last and the beginning. So what we want is to say that if the ID is the beginning or the end, so if maximum of the ID, so are we on the first or are we on the 5th column? And if we are on the 1st or the 5th column, then we take only the bridge value because we don't want to have any running total. And for every other case, we're going to have our running total used, right? And this is bridge Gantt position, right? So I'm using that. I will replace now my small table calculation, and I end up with this, which is, hey, my bridge is created, and I'm able to create it very easily. Now, if I would want to tackle this kind of split on dimension bridge, then it's exactly the same. I just need here 3 IDs to bring inside my data. I will have the same beginning and the end than the one I just did. And on the value number 2, instead of bringing my price effect or my volume effect, I will just bring my dimensions for the column and my profit, for example. And this is helping me directly to build my bridge. I can also show you something a bit more difficult, for example, when we talk about those kind of bridge, where we have steps in between and stuff like that. Well, it works exactly the same way. We just bring tiny bit more IDs because we need to have more steps here. So for example, I've got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 IDs across which I'm splitting data across my categories. I just also added some more headers in order to divide my data, but it works exactly the same way. Now, this is something that is going to work if you are a creator and if you can modify your data. If you can't, then I would advise you to use either multiple worksheets, either map layers. I'm going to talk quickly about the map layers, and maybe if I can maybe go over 3 to 4 minutes, I will see, you tell me, Sarah, maybe I talk about the several sheets, but I want to talk quickly about the map layers. Which is something extremely powerful that Tableau introduced 3 years ago. I'm not going, of course, to show you how everything works on that, but I will publish also my slide, and you can watch this great video where Adam McCann is actually explaining everything in depth and teaching you how to use those. But if we want to use the map layers, that is something that we can leverage in order to build, for example, a bridge chart very easily without having also to create and transform our data source, right? The way it works is that we are going to have to create some points, and those points, they work with latitude and longitude, right? So we're going to use those make points functions, and we are going to display some bars. For example, here the height is going to be last year sales, so this is the sales, and I'm dividing it by the maximum of sales. Why am I doing that? Is just because if I want to work on a map, if I want to be able to display latitude and longitudes, I cannot use my overall sales because they go over maybe 200,000 sometimes. And this is absolutely not an existing value for longitude or latitude. So what we want is to actually normalize our data in order to have it from 0 to 1. And as soon as we've got that, then we can, and we are free to then click on those make points, create some different points inside our maps. For example, here I've got the starts, I've got the end of my different layers. And the way I would actually build that, I would just drag and drop my different make points in order to actually display some bars inside my map. And for the middle one, I would just need to bring my subcategories in order to have my different points. But I will, again, use those map layers to display as many KPIs as I want. Now, the only tricky thing about that is that you will need, and I need to show you the way it works with the make point middle, for example. I had to create 2 calculations that are my positions for each subcategory and my height for each subcategory. And this is something that may be a bit tricky because you will need to identify what are the different points that you want to display where. And for example, as you cannot use table calculations such as index within the make points, then you need to actually build your index. And it makes it a bit less dynamic, it makes it a bit less friendly when it comes to filtering and so on. But you can actually use it, and you can use this kind of stuff to actually create a bridge chart with Tableau. So what I would do if I would need to bring to build a bridge chart with Tableau, I would actually use 4 layers, start and end for my 2 first columns and the last one. And I would also use here 2 layers that are overlapping in order to actually create this Gantt chart effect. Because the thing is, I tried to do that without using the bars and using Gantt charts. But the thing is, you cannot really size them properly once you use the map layers. So I would prefer to use 2 overlapping bars and put those on top of each other so that then I can also have something maybe a bit more proper. And I can also rework my different bars and say that I want to go here to map, remove the complete map layer, here go to known, have my different bars, and therefore I will be able to say, okay, this is the size that I want to put on each and every bar that I have, so that I have something that is more suitable. So I would advise you to follow the video that I suggested by Adam McCann, and then using this tutorial and having also the different corrections and the solution that I will directly publish on my public, then you should be able to build your own bar using the map layers, and to build something that would look like that and give you directly a bridge chart looking like a bridge chart. Even if it's 2 bar charts, I can hide that and see that it's actually only bar charts. But you can have something that looks like a bridge chart using map layers. So I think I'm going over time, so maybe I should stop here, right?
You can, if you've got a few more slides, you can cover them off. We have until the top of the hour. So far, we have no questions. So I'd say if you want maybe 2 to 3 more minutes, feel free.
Okay, sure. So the last one, thank you. The last one technique we could use is to actually create a bridge chart using multiple worksheets. That is the oldest one and the most simple one also that we would find on the net. Actually, if you want to build this kind of thing, what you can do is to create it using several worksheets. So you would define a start, an end, and then also the middle, right? I've prepared already the different worksheets. And then as soon as you have your start, your middle, and your end, then you can directly put everything inside a dashboard, and you will be able to build using 3 worksheets something that looks like that. So if I would start with this, maybe, so what I would do is just to keep the year that interests me, add also directly, I will do it here. I will start to display the year that I want, 2021, add on top of that the different sales that I want to represent. So I have directly my first bar. I will do also the same for the end. So dragging again my different years, keeping only the last year that is available, and add my sales on top of that. And now the tricky thing is to build the middle part, right? Because what I want to display is the growth, the sales growth for each subcategory. And the thing is, I will want to have this as a running total, but my running total should not start at 0, right? It should start at the start of my own bar. So I'm going to have to rework it a bit to create a new calculated field and say that my Gantt bar position are going to be depending on the number of the bar that is actually represented, right? So what I'm going to have to do is that I'm going to have to use a last calculation and say a first calculation, sorry, and say that if this is the first bar that is shown, then I'm going to take also the total of the sum of the sales minus 1. And I'm going to use that to add this to my up to my different bars, else 0, end. So what I do here is that I'm just saying to Tableau that I want to add on top of my different sales growth also the sum of sales minus 1 when I'm on the first bar, right? So here I'm just adding this, and it should give me, oh, sorry. Okay, this should work. All right, so I just need to twist it a bit in order to have my start from the sales that I had last year. So I'm taking this, I will just display it here on the rows, and then I have something that is a bit more suitable. Here I can now add I have my different elements. I can also go here to have my different Gantt bars. I just made a small mistake, I'm sorry. Chook, and there goes the running total, right? Running sum here. Okay, yeah. All right, so now I have all the different elements. I just need to bring again my sales growth to the size, to also to revert it a bit so that my Gantt bars are created at the bottom, and then I can start creating my bridge chart. So I will bring the start, the middle, the end. And now the issue we have is that the axis may not be labeled and have the same scale. And that's the main issue with that. We need to actually add on top of that something that would be a reference line and is going to give us and align all the data. So we need something called reference line, for example, and this is going to be the maximum of the different values that are represented. So it's going to be maximum of the sales -1 and the sales n. But we want also to have, and that's what I would do usually, I would add also sales n and the sum of the absolute value of the sales growth. And therefore you can have an overall, I'm gonna go over time, I think, so I'm gonna need to stop here, but what we want is to have an overall sum of the different sales growth that we had, so that we can sum up all of those middle points in order to know what is the highest value we are actually reaching. And therefore we have an ability to actually calculate what is the maximum value and make sure that we don't have any issue with the different axes. What we could also do is something very dummy and say that we are just going to increase this by 20%. And if we would do that, then we can just here add a reference line, add this as a reference line everywhere and make sure that everything gets aligned. So add a reference line here. Of course, we would hide it everywhere and make sure that everything works. Etc. So sorry, I'm trying to speed it up and I'm getting lost, so maybe I should stop here actually. But yeah, basically that's how it works. I would just hide everything I can and make sure that I'm now implementing this reference line everywhere in order to make sure that I can align all my different axes. Sorry, Sarah.
You're good. Thank you so much. I had no idea there were so many approaches to building waterfall charts. Like I think I've always followed the first approach you showed, and you just completely blown my mind that there's so many more approaches. So I can't wait to check these out. There's a question in the Q&A, but I'm struggling to open up the Q&A box. So if you did post that question, could you just paste it into the chat, and then I'll figure out what's going on with the Q&A.
I have the Q&A open. It says, amazing work, thank you. Will this workbook be available on your Tableau public profile?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to publish everything as soon as I'm done with the presentation. So you're going to have everything with all the different calculations and workbooks. So yeah.
Perfect. And thank you, Lorna. Good morning.
No worries. Good morning.
And Maxime, if you had a choice, which approach would you take?
I would definitely go for the relationship one, because that's the most, let's say, easy to understand, I think, because you just create your different IDs, place your different points. And also because that's the most dynamic one in terms of filtering, refreshing data. That's the most flexible one.
Okay.
Also, with the relationship model, you don't actually increase that much your hyper size. So it's something that you can use also pretty much easily. It costs nothing in terms of performances. So as soon as you're not using maybe several hundred millions of rows, it should be fine.
Yeah, I really like that approach. It looked like really innovative. It's not something I considered before, but yeah, definitely look forward to having a look at the workbook and checking this out. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. If you could post a link to the workbook in the chat,
sure,
that would be great, and then people can check it out in their own time.